Right, so good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Wirtz, Director of the Thames Valley AI Hub. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening for our event, How to Make Data Science More Racially Inclusive. The problem with AI bias is a serious one, and in a world where human results are often challenged, algorithms rarely are, and the decisions they make have a real and lasting effect on people's lives. Collecting data that is cleansed of errors, holes, and biases is essential for AI systems to be explainable, transparent, and fair. So why is this so difficult to achieve? Our two amazing speakers this evening will be unpicking this problem and explaining why diversity in all stages of AI development is essential to deliver outcomes that are fair for all races and genders. Our first speaker is Andrew Sivanesan, Senior Data Science Specialist at NATS. Andrew founded Global, a employee support network for cultural minorities, and the Young Professionals Network at NATS, and is a speaker about race inclusion and best practice. He'll be followed by Bumi Durowoju, Microsoft Senior Business Development Manager, Emerging Markets, AI and Intelligent Cloud, Microsoft Airband Initiative. Bunmi has been recognized as a top 100 most influential leaders in tech and sits on the Women at Microsoft board, championing underrepresented groups. We're also joined by Claire Stratford, the Hub's Events and Network Coordinator, and she'll be taking control of the Q&A. There'll be an opportunity after both talks to ask any questions you may have, so please add your questions to the chat and Claire will get to as many as she can. If you wish to remain anonymous, they can be emailed to tvaihub@reading.ac.uk, and the email account will be monitored throughout the session. So this is a topic which you're all clearly interested in, and in lieu of face-to-face networking, if you'd like to post your LinkedIn details in the chat and make any comments about yourself, then please do that. I'm sure there's no need to remind everyone, but please can you make sure that your microphones are muted throughout. And finally, I need to advise you that we're recording this session today and we're made available on the Libraries tab of our website shortly after the event this evening. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Andrew for the first presentation this evening. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone. Thames Valley AI Hub. It's great to be here. And this is the awkward bit where I have to share my screen and hope nothing goes wrong.
Yeah, there you go, it's sharing.
Cool. I'm just trying to go into full screen. There we go. Perfect. Yes. So I am Andrew Sivanesan, Senior Data Science Specialist at NATS, UK's air traffic control and air navigation service provider. Just as a caveat and just full disclosure, I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not my employer. So all views expressed are my own. In terms of tonight's talk, the topics I'll be covering will include the white-centric nature of technology recruitment, racial bias within data sets, what this leads to in terms of AI and data science solutions, some epic fails that have occurred in recent months, and how we can do better as an industry, because there's definitely opportunities for us to do better and there are options to do better. It's just a case of being aware of the options available. And then importantly, I'll be opening up to Q&A. So definitely keep note of any questions that come up, and I'll try and answer them towards the end. Cool, so let's get started with the white-centric nature of technology and data science recruitment. So let's look at some statistics. So in the UK, only 4% of the technology workforce is Black, Asian, and minority ethnic, otherwise known as BAME, despite being 14% of the UK population. So we are heavily underrepresented within the technology space, and that's in the UK. What about the US? And if we distill BAME into the Black population, so Black people are even worse in terms of underrepresentation within leading US tech organizations. So at Google, 2.5%, Facebook, 4%, Microsoft, 4%. So it's really important when we talk about BAME, which is a controversial term within the BAME communities, because there are disparities even within that kind of umbrella category. And unfortunately, what we see is our Black colleagues being more heavily underrepresented within the tech space than, say, for example, South Asian individuals. So it's really important to, when we talk about this, we do look at the different identity groups that fall within BAME identity brackets. Okay, so on the one hand, we'll bring in, mainly white people into the technology industry to do technology work, and then those, typically overall white people are then working on white-centric data sets. Unfortunately, what we see is a lot of these data sets that are our AI and machine learning algorithms are being trained on reflect wider structural inequalities within our society. So as an example, social media posts. So some of you may remember the incident with Tay, the chatbot that was launched into the world a few years back, that was trained on Twitter posts. And unfortunately, what we see with Twitter and social media posts is that a lot of them are racist, a lot of them are sexist, a lot of them are homophobic. So when you train a chatbot on that data and you don't take that into consideration, what happened was within a few minutes and within an hour or so, you had basically a neo-Nazi chatbot. And that's because it was trained on a racist, sexist, homophobic data set that wasn't cleaned and wasn't really kind of managed in the right way, really, and ended up becoming quite a bit of a failure in terms of the solution that was put out into the world. And that's just one example. If we look at, for example, movie preferences, movie recommendation systems and things like that, in terms of our media, it tends to focus on white protagonists written by white writers, produced by white producers, directed by white directors. So maybe there's plenty of really excellent movies made by Black and brown people, but those aren't the ones that are getting up-ranked, and not necessarily people being kind of recommended those sorts of movies. It tends to be the traditional Hollywood type movies with the typical Hollywood A-list celebrities in them. If you look at crime statistics, educational outcomes, health outcomes, unfortunately, we see a lot of overrepresentation, for example, of the Black population within crime statistics due to the over-policing of the Black community. Worse health outcomes, again, for Black people, but equally for Asian and minority ethnic people more widely. So there's a lot of disparities there. So we can't take an agnostic or neutral view of data. We need to be cognizant of these things, and we need to manage our data sets and work with our data sets with that in mind, and try and remove whatever biases may exist when we're building our algorithms and our tools and our solutions. So we've got to bring in mainly white people to work on white-centered data sets, and then what that ends up resulting in is white-centric solutions. Unfortunately, what we have is a lack of BAME involvement within the product lifecycle, whether that's design phase, build phase, validation and testing phase. We're not in that loop, and that's a fundamental problem, really. We're not involved, we're not included in the training data sets, or if we are included, we're included in a very negative way, where we're labeled as the criminals, or we're labeled as the people that get disproportionately sick, and there's no kind of background or nuance as to why that may be the case from a structural perspective. And unfortunately, what that leads to is products and solutions that unwittingly discriminate effectively against BAME people. So let's look at some unfortunate examples of the kind of solutions that are coming out there, and situations that are arising within the tech space. So recently, back in December, some of you may have read this, but Timnit Gebru, a AI researcher at Google, conducted some research that identified racial bias within AI language models, and she was effectively removed from the company as a result of that. And then she's been very outspoken, and she's gone out into the media and put Google on blast for the way that she's been treated for doing some very legitimate research, which she got a lot of flack and criticism for, but it was kind of sound from a research perspective. The A-level grading algorithm, we saw all the controversies around that back in the summer, and unfortunately, given that the algorithms built on past performance of schools, then if you're that unfortunately discriminated against and negatively penalized ethnic minority pupils who may end up, living in more urbanized areas with higher rates of poverty, etc., may not necessarily be going to the best performing schools. And unfortunately, there are bigger issues within the education system in terms of predicted grades given to Black and brown children. So that's already a structural inequality that exists within the education system. And the grading algorithm effectively just compounded that. And that wasn't really taken into account when that algorithm was deployed. Then with the Met Police, they're using facial recognition CCTV in East London, despite campaigners warning them about the racial bias within those image data sets. Unfortunately, we know about all the issues around institutional racism within the Met Police has been widely publicized, and the over criminalization and the over policing of the Black community. And unfortunately, these kind of things are going to filter into things like predictive crime algorithms, facial recognition, CCTV, and unfortunately, we're not seeing the level of kind of governance and oversight in this sort of aspects. So how can we do better? There's a lot of negative stuff, and you may be in despair in terms of the current situation. How can we as an industry do better on this? Firstly, an area we can start with is diversifying recruitment. And there are a couple of solutions here. These are not endorsements by any means. I have no ties to these organizations or these products, but these are some examples to be aware of. Piemetrics uses game-based behavioral assessments to assess candidates, to kind of remove the racial bias that can be inherent in traditional recruitment processes for technology roles. They also provide an open source tool called Audit AI for measuring algorithmic bias, which anyone can use for their algorithms. So that's really positive. And then Applied is anonymized recruitment software, and they claim to have 4 times more attraction and selection of ethnically diverse candidates. So those are 2 examples of tools that and organizations that hiring managers can work with to try and diversify their talent pipeline. There may be others, and this is certainly not endorsements of these particular solutions. I've not used them personally, but equally, these are the kind of things that I would like to see hiring managers on this call really having a think about. How can they diversify their talent pipeline, diversify their recruitment? Diversifying data sets is another thing that we can do. So IBM had an initiative called Diversity in Faces, and that's a data that's been developed to aid the progression of creating fair facial recognition algorithms. Unfortunately, we've seen there was the Google Images controversy a while back, where Black people were being classified as gorillas, which is really horrible and just unacceptable. And unfortunately, Google's approach was just to stop labeling images with the label gorilla, which isn't a solution at all, really. So we need data sets like this that are diversified and represent Black and brown people in a positive way, and a tool that can be used to help train better algorithms, particularly around facial recognition and the value judgments that are placed on facial features and facial aspects. Decolonizing AI. So this is an initiative being led by the Leverhulme Center for the Future of Intelligence. And they recently, a few months back, they released a research paper called The Whiteness of AI, where they explored the white-centered nature of AI, not just in the application of AI in the real world, even the kind of popular culture representations of AI. So whenever we think of AI, we literally think of the color white. And even in movies, things like the movie Ex Machina, AI was actually represented with an attractive white woman. And you think of Siri, Cortana, Alexa, we're using the voices of white women to represent AI. So that has a residual kind of impact in terms of people's view of what AI is and who AI is for and who it's meant to serve. And then these are things we need to be very cognizant of when we're developing these solutions. And we're not just developing AI for white people, we're developing AI for everybody. So there, their initiative and the Decolonizing AI is something that we should all be following and being aware of. So what are the next steps for us all, really, within, as technologists, as AI practitioners, as machine learning practitioners, people operating within this space? We all have a responsibility, whatever our identity is. We do need to do better. We do need to take this on the chin and really step up. And what I'd like to see really is, as an industry, we need to seek to actively recruit BAME technology professionals, especially Black professionals. They are heavily underrepresented within our sector, and we need to do better. And the talent is out there, but unfortunately, the processes and the ways of going about recruitment aren't targeting and aren't reaching those individuals. So we need to step up and really reach out and really demonstrate ourselves as hiring managers and employers of choice for Black professionals. We need to address racial biases within data sets. I've offered some ways forward on that, but we need to be actively thinking about this, particularly if we're developing solutions that are consumer facing, people facing. I guess in any context really, but particularly in those settings, we need to be very cognizant and not just take a neutral view on data and not just take data as given. We need to be actively addressing bias. We think a lot about statistical bias as data scientists, but we need to think about racial bias as well. And we need to involve more BAME people within the product lifecycle process. They need to be involved in the design phase, they need to be involved in the build phase, the validation and testing phase, the governance of AI and machine learning. This is really important. They don't necessarily have to be technologists, but they need to be involved. It can't just be white people developing solutions for themselves. Everyone needs to be involved. So we need to be more cognizant of that too. So some thought leaders, just to wrap up, and for you to go away and follow on LinkedIn or Twitter. Kanta Dahal, she's one of the leaders of the Decolonizing AI project. So she's one of the authors of the Whiteness of AI research paper. She's definitely someone worth following. Mike Bigembe, again, he's kind of leading Black technologist. I believe he founded Just Giving, and he sold it for $100 million. So he's been pretty successful in the tech space. So someone worth following. And then Timnit Gebru as well. She's she's now ex-Google, but she was at Google, and she's a leading researcher on AI. And someone to keep an eye out for. And she's doing a lot of work around racial inclusivity within tech too. Cool. So yeah, thank you for your time. Happy for people, if you've enjoyed this talk, then please, I'm happy for you to follow me on LinkedIn. My personal email address is included as well. And also just to let you know, I do have an audio course out now called How to Build Racial Inclusivity in Your Workplace on Listenable. I'll send a link to these. I'll send these slides out, so you'll have access to all the links. But yeah, if you've enjoyed this talk, then please do have a listen to my audio course. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll open now to questions.
There you go. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. We have got some questions in the chat that I'd like to put to you now. So what do you think, how would you think that the Black Lives Matter movement has changed things?
Changed what? In terms of,
has it improved?
Question.
Sorry, say again?
That's quite a broad question.
Do you think it has improved? Do you think it has helped? Do you think it raised people's awareness of the situation that you're explaining tonight?
It's a good question. I think it's raised awareness. Has it led to meaningful action? I'm going to be very honest. I'm going to say no. I think there's a lot more work to do. I think a lot of people have done, soul searching and maybe done some more research, and that's kind of where people got by the end of 2020. But over the course of this year, we do need to move towards action, because these issues have been going on for a very long time, and they've been well documented. And I think people need to, I'm going to put it out there. People need to now move towards just being aware towards actual action and then really stepping up. And that's what I'd like to, that's my kind of clarion call to everyone on this call, really to, really go away and look at your processes and look at the way your team or your organization goes about delivering technology solutions, ML solutions, AI solutions, whatever it may be, and think very critically and think very carefully as to where are there biases. And if you don't feel that you can figure that out within yourself or within your team, then maybe you maybe need to bring in experts, external experts to do that for you. But that's the discussion that that needs to be had within your organization, whether you're an SME or whether you're a large corporate. Yes, it is necessary.
Thank you. I have another question here. I have heard from people who identify as Black, Indigenous and Hispanic that obtaining a job within AI is hard. What barriers do you feel people of colour face when trying to start their career within AI?
I think one is a lack of role models that come from our sort of identity background. And then that makes it difficult to network, because you're having to network with people that may not be of, you may not naturally connect with, or they may have their own perceptions about Black and brown people or Hispanic people or people who are not white, and that's a general issue that we face on a daily basis, whether it's in industry or whether it's in life generally. Lack of opportunity, not having those natural connections. I grew up working class. My mom works at Tesco, my dad works at Royal Mail. I don't have any connections within the tech space. I've had to build that all from scratch, whereas I have friends and colleagues who are white who have those connections, so that makes a massive difference. And then for certain communities, if you're going to school and you're getting poor predicted grades and you're being overly disciplined, or you're more likely to get excluded from school, then you're not even going to go to university, let alone be able to get a job in tech. And you may have all the talent that's required, but if you're facing all those structural prejudices and discrimination, then you may not even get the opportunity. So there's a lot of real issues that are explicit and also implicit and structural.
Sure. Okay, thank you. I have another question in the chat here. There's many positive comments about your talk this evening. So great presentation, thanks Andrew. What are the non-technology solutions to attracting diverse talent in tech roles?
Non-technology. I think one element is outreach. As an example, no one ever promoted a tech career to me when I was growing up, and I think that was a real shame. And I think I'd like to see more technology companies reaching out to schools with high proportions of ethnic minority peoples, and really demonstrating that there are opportunities for them within technology space, and really promoting themselves as credible employers of choice. But before they do that, they need to really look at their own internal practices, because what we're seeing is a lot of organizations doing all the outreach work without actually figuring out all the internals and understanding why is it that they're not recruiting Black and brown people, and why they're not and once they recruit these people, why they're not actually giving them the opportunities in terms of work allocation, and they're not getting the promotion opportunities, and why they're bleeding this talent back out into the world, or discriminating against them, and things like that. So in terms of non-technical solutions, it's again, I'm going to be quite harsh. You need to get your house in order. You need to take a long, hard look at your processes and be very critical, and figure out, iron out those solutions, and then once you figure those out, then start going out and promoting opportunities to underrepresented communities.
That's great advice, thank you. I think we've got time for one more. Okay, so here we got great talk. I was interested in one word on the slide that implied that much of this racial bias was unwitting. The examples you showed, for example, the Met Police, surely question how unwitting it is. They knew the tech was racially biased, but they rolled it out anyway. How unwitting, in inverted commas, do you think this racial bias is from major institutions?
Yeah, a good spot, and I was being diplomatic. Yeah, I definitely think that there's an element of consciousness as well in certain areas. Yeah, yeah, again, I'm going to be very honest. I think some of it is just people aren't aware of these things, and that's not. I'm not making excuses for those individuals. I think at this stage now, post George Floyd, post BLM, I don't think there's any excuse for not being aware of these sorts of issues. But then, yeah, there's enough stories within the tech sector or in wider sectors where the discrimination is rife and it is really quite explicit. So yeah, I think this is a very dark topic, and the more you look into the details, the darker it gets. So yeah, again, this comes back to people getting the house in order, really, and just being, yeah, looking at the processes, looking at the behaviors and the culture within organizations. We need to go beyond the whole tech bro culture within technology, and really make it more inclusive, and make sure that we're really being as inclusive as possible of people of all identities, but particularly within the context of this talk, Black and brown people.
Okay, thank you. That's really good. That's really interesting. A really great answer. Thank you. And you did give us some thought leaders who you shared with us, who obviously we're going to follow on LinkedIn now. But I just wondered, can you recommend any other support networks or resources that we might reach out to?
I'm not aware of any that I can think of right now. If anything comes to me, then I'll flag it either today or in the future. But I can't think of anything at this moment in time. I think those individuals are probably a good place to start.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, thank you very much. We've had, you've given us amazing advice there, and on the things that we need to do to take away the takeaways from this. So I will ask that if you want to have a look in the chat, there are some more questions in there, and if you wanted to answer, please feel free to react as you see fit. So mindful of time, we're now going to move straight over to our second speaker. So Bumi, I'd like to pass over to you, if I may, please.
Absolutely. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, hear you.
Okay, that was a nervous like half a second where nobody answered, so it's cool. So look, hello everybody. So my name is Bumi Durowoju, and honestly, through that session from Andrew and the questions, I was literally hopping up and wanting to put my hands up and answer and jump in on some of the thinking. So thank you so much for some of those questions. Andrew, thank you so much for that talk. And then there's great benefits of coming on after a data scientist, because you've obviously come with all the data. And so I get to kind of stand here and noodle a little bit with you. I don't have much time. We can talk about this for a long time. I should say that I'm from Microsoft. As you heard, I look after strategic partnerships, but I also am here as Bumi, mother of a daughter who is going to and wants to be a data scientist. I'm here as someone who is trying to pave the way for some of the improvements and some of the things we need to see that Andrew has so articulately laid out. So that's here from a personal perspective. And I'm also here in terms of just trying to do my best and my bit as a senior in the tech industry. I also have such an interest in what's happening in the data science area and everything that falls underneath it. So let me just crack on in terms of thoughts, and I'm here as, I would say, a thought leader too, so you can put me underneath that, because really this is about us thinking about the real impact, in addition to, as well as enhancing some of the things that Andrew has said. But first, let's think about our mindset when we're talking about this. Andrew just said you know, this is dark, difficult stuff. And Akala came to speak to us at Microsoft a few months ago during the Black Lives Matter thing. Akala, very erudite. He's actually a hip hop artist, but he's really deep into African culture, and he talks so eloquently. He can do history and up to now in 30 seconds. He's amazing. He came to speak to us about what was happening from a race perspective. And someone said to him, when do you think we'll fix it and it will be done? Kind of, so in essence. And he answered, and I kept his answer, and I'm going to share the answer with you. His answer was, look, every generation has got its battle to deal with. Every generation has had its battle. And we just have to think that, and we could already wheel back, right? We know from the slavery times, the battle to get out of being slaves. We know from apartheid in South Africa, the battle to be accepted as Blacks in your own country. And we can carry on with those conversations. And here, at the moment with us here, we have our battle, our area for this generation to think about. And it's encapsulated actually in something that Andrew said that I read the other day, which is the next frontier of discrimination is in the realms of technology and AI. So let's take a breath of that. The next frontier of discrimination is in the technological realms of AI. And what I'm going to try and do now and over the next few minutes is just really land the depth of this issue, not to be too negative, but when we land really the impact of what's happening, then we truly start to understand maybe what we can do to go forward. So if we think about the power that we have, and we think about the solutions, we really start to understand that there's a trust issue that we need to fix here. And there's also a need for us to be hopeful and make sure we are all going to trust what's going to happen with technology. There's also a timing issue as well. And Andrew just mentioned it. When he was coming up, he didn't have necessarily the role models, but he still went forward and he qualified. He didn't necessarily have people outreaching, but he did his thing. Now I know, and I can say, so this is the hopeful bit, right? Yes, I've seen, I was just on a call a few hours ago where we had our Black and brown early in careers reaching out to universities saying, hey, come and do this stuff. There is work going on. We know that there's some work going on in STEM. We need more women, we need more girls, we have the data, so the positivity of data to say we need more women, we need more ethnic minorities, we need more people in the industry. Go out, you need to get good at maths, you need to do your science. We have all of that in place. But what we need to land, and when we really, really start to understand the gravity of this, is that it is in no way at the speed of the technology that we're talking about. We talk about gaps, right? We talk about in COVID's lockdown situation alone, the educational gap, the digital gap, and what have you. We talk about those gaps. We talk about how and why, how and why that's happening. But we need to understand the speed of technological innovation and the speed of which we're fixing this thing. It's tortoise and a very fast car. That needs to land. And then we need to understand how quickly we've got to do some things. So when we now are kind of in this sort of mindset of this is our generational issue to fix, let's again land this power of what data science and all of the things underneath it. And we do not have time to really unpick what exactly the areas of data science. We've talked about AI, we've talked about data and analytics. We know we've got this data insights and trends, and we have all of this, and we have all of these things that a data scientist does. And out of all of the things, let's talk about the influence, the power the decisions that data science is producing and allowing. Andrew's mentioned it before, deciding who goes to jail and who doesn't, deciding who passes their exams and who doesn't, deciding who's going to get a health solution and who doesn't, and then looking at our community and just realizing, as we are creating our data science models and doing our work in data science, as we are ingesting the outcomes of data science, what the true implications of what you are doing is. It is not just about a technological deliverable. It's not just about, I have been asked to deliver this piece of data to this government body, to this financial body. I'm just going to do it and go walk away. The thinking needs to go, what's beyond that? What are you influencing? It is a powerful, phenomenal, and absolutely amazing area, this big data area. It's huge. But to be able to think back and take a step mindset and say, how and what am I delivering and what it's going to impact, is so, so, so important. The fact that, and we know that we are all programmable human beings, and I could do a whole hour on how we could be programmed in terms of taking our data, understanding what our habits are, looking at even what our biological signals are, mulching that together and being able to say, hey, when Bumi is kind of like 6 o'clock, she gets a little bit tired, she gets a bit thing, actually, I'll send something about Ovaltine because I know she'll go and drink it. Being able to program me in that way is hugely powerful. And then if we add the inequalities with respect to race, gender, and all of the other underrepresented areas that we're looking at, we realize that there is a huge issue. And these are the things that I want to just share that makes everybody sort of just take a breath. The ability that you can decide, my son, who may want to go and be a doctor, puts doctor in there and doesn't see anybody that looks like us in a search engine, doesn't see that. My daughter who wants to be maybe a film producer, puts something in, doesn't see anything from a film producers that look like her, because there has been this consistent issue in terms of data and the way data is not represented. So with great power comes the responsibility. But that responsibility is all of ours, because ultimately we are all going to be impacted. And you mentioned this before. This is not just about the Black people having to fix it for the Black people. And we should talk about that. We're going to talk about that when we do talk about this hiring procedure. So important to have everybody there. But it does not take away from the fact that this is all of our issues. Let's talk about a quick kind of like COVID ditty I've been thinking about. I am not sure if it makes sense. I want you all to come at me and tell me, does that make sense? But you know that there has been an issue about the BAME community being overly adversely affected by the COVID virus. We know that we have the vaccines, or a number of vaccines. And we know there's also an issue amongst the community who are saying, I want to take that vaccine. Why do I want to take that vaccine? Unfortunately, this is not being looked at in the way that I'm about to tell you now. If the people who are not confident about taking a vaccine actually are not confident that this vaccine has been tested technologically, so let's say there is a data science, a data analytical piece about how any of these vaccines were created, a data science element about the impact of the vaccine. Let's say that there is that area there. And let us say that, hold on, if I ask you, did you make sure that that was tested in a way that has taken me into consideration? Would the answer be yes, or would the answer be no? In the same instance, if you were able to say, actually, I can verify that it's gone through this cycle, a bit like what Andrew said, where there have been members of the community across the cycle who have looked at that and have verified that actually we're warmer this way, or we live that way, or we eat this way. And so as able to give me some confidence in the fact that the data, the trends, the decisions that are made about this health, vaccines and what have you, is good for me, then we have solutions for that's going to impact not just the BAME community, but also everybody at large. But it's a trust situation. If we have people who were saying, go take this vaccine, we're great, and they're the same people that supported the East London issue around the use of AI on the streets, why on earth would I trust that? Would I, however, trust if I or Andrew was able to come and say, that went through our labs, we've taken a look at this, and we actually feel that may be good for you, or we stopped something from happening here. We realized it did not take into account a certain genetic situation. We realized actually it did not take into account other things that are specific to our community. This is the kind of thing that we're trying to talk about. This is the type of impact that the work of data science, its trend setting, analytics, and all the rest of it will have on our society, and why it becomes all of our responsibility. Following on about it being all of our responsibilities and the time it's taken, we cannot wait for us to fill the entire pipeline for there to be fixed. So when I say pipeline, to Andrew's point, I want somebody at the build phase. I want somebody at the engineering phase. I need somebody at the experimental phase. And I need somebody in governance. I need somebody at a leadership phase who's going to have a look at this. I need somebody coming up in a pipeline. I can't actually wait for that. And so what I need to do is rely on the entire data science community to be aware that there's something that they need to look at. And this is great, right? Because we start talking about just being honest about our biases, just being honest about what we're doing on a day-to-day basis and where it's going to go. And so at that point, we start to say, those data scientists who are here on the call and those who are along the life cycle, we've been told, don't be afraid. There's nobody at you. There's nothing to be defensive about. In fact, you've been empowered to say, wow, okay, I know there's a possibility that I could have some very narrow data sets here. I'm going to start from there. I'm going to look at and think about my training set model. I know we've got an issue in terms of biases. I need to have a look at that. I want to look at those algorithms that I put in place. And if I don't get it, I need to get someone to come and look for me. And that actually, to me, means that you are doing your job properly. You are doing something that's allowing you to stand by the decisions, stand by the data you're sharing, stand by the way that you are helping with your data analysis. And go further than that. Don't just think, I as an individual might have an issue. What company you're working for? What does your company look like? Do they have any even mindset to kind of probe you to have a good look? If it's not your company, your team, what do your team look like? Is everybody called John? Is everybody called Joanne? Was everybody called Kamal? And even if everybody was called Bumi, it would be a problem. What does your team look like? What does the company or the people who are going to receive your work look like? Who are they? What possible biases could they have? Is it the Metropolitan Police that are expecting there to be a higher number of X than Y in their area? And so when they received information, didn't question it? Is it an education system that expected all of the children in a certain area to have underseas? Did they expect it? So it might feel that I'm kind of like talking in the skies and what have you, but if we kind of land this type of thinking, we start to literally, as of now, as we finish this call, knowing what we can do in our sphere, knowing what we can probe and knowing what we can think about. So I want to give everybody a chance to ask questions, but I want to very quickly talk about this filling the pipeline with a diverse set of professionals. Hugely important. We need to do that. And at every level, people are trying, some genuinely, some not quite so genuinely, but people are trying. The next area that I am pushing people and we want people to think about is, what experience will they have? Anybody on this call, just go like, I'm gonna go and recruit some Black people, yeah. If you bring the Black people into your company, what experience are they gonna have? Do they have, as Andrew said, a role model? Have you acknowledged their differences? Have you ensured that they are welcome? Have you ensured that they will be listened to? Or have you created a culture where they'll say, I'll come, but I just need to fit in? When they come into the organization, are you going to make it their responsibility to fix everything? Because we see that a lot. Oh, we've hired the Black person, we've hired the brown person, that brown person, Black person, it's on you to, could please fix this. Don't get me wrong. I do not believe a Black or brown person would be in a position and not want to try and fix it. But do not just put all of that on the shoulders of the one person. You have to be a team of every color, every area. The other piece is, and it was a question that was asked about communities and what have you. Sorry, I think it was recruit. I can't remember what it was, but I want to say the point. I think it was like about how you can get people in recruited and what have you. We need people from every area, and we need the corporations to lead by example. And I am so proud, and I never always used to be proud. I am so proud of Satya Nadella, our CEO at Microsoft. The way he dealt with Black Lives Matter, the way he dealt with the issues that came out of racial inequalities, was come out and say he was making some real changes. He was done with this because he had been trying. And he put money where his mouth is. He changed some of our suppliers. He looked at where we were in making investments. He's looking at our leadership. He's saying, I see where the issue is and I'm having this thing done. A lot of people added him. A lot of people added us. And when I say add, I'm using street slang. A lot of people said, oh, you're giving everybody a favor. Guys, we know that that's not the case. And even if that's what people want to think, that's where we have to be courageous. Remember the battle I talked about? Remember what we have to do for this generation? But our CEO kind of sent a message to me as well, just saying, stay resolute in what we need to do, move forward, be absolutely hopeful because we have such great opportunities at the moment, such great opportunities to fix this. I'm also delighted to say is I have seen a bunch of early in careers in tech out there doing their thing. They're not all data scientists. They're not even all a science background. In fact, we're encouraging non-science background to come into the industry because that gives us more of a broader understanding of what's going on. But what we're trying to do is make sure from root to branch, at each little knobble and notch, someone is doing something. And it's not just about making the Black and brown people happy. I hope that I've landed that now. This is about making the whole of our community work properly. It's about actually your work being right. If a data scientist has not done this work and you come up with some kind of trend for me to follow, I have the right to say, it's wrong, it's biased, go back, do your work. So at that point, I've got loads more to talk about, but I want to have a chat with you. So I will stop right there. Claire, over to you.
Yeah, Bunmi, that was incredible. I mean, honestly, incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today. It's really hard to know where to start with everyone's talking about how powerful this is. You know, culturally, we're too focused on short-term success. I've got one here. Culturally, we are too focused on short-term success rather than a sustainable approach that may not make a difference for 5 years plus.
Yes.
You know, I completely agree with the responsibility sits with everyone. What action can individuals who don't work in the sector take to call out the racial bias that exists in technology and that they experience or recognize when they're using that technology?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, that's a lot, right? So was that someone who's not in the tech industry?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting, I love that because it goes on to some other areas. I am a lawyer by trade. As some people know, I came from IP. I do business within Microsoft. Being here long enough, to be honest, I'm pretty okay on some of the tech as well. So I think one thing is to know that you don't necessarily have to be in tech to impact what we need to get done here now. You just need a voice, because I think I was trying and do some of Andrew's reading and get out there. The impact in all of the different non-tech arenas is still palpable, right? It's just that the tech's impact is what we say. We say, come into tech, even if you're interested in sewing, come into tech if you're interested in art, come into tech if you're interested in whatever, because we know at the moment we have a whole tech overlay with with Andrew and everything. We have a tech overlay, but the impact, the ability to influence often falls outside of that. So make sure you still have your role models. Be positive about what we feel we can do. If you have people in your younger people in your area and they're just struggling from a school perspective on the rest of them, help them along. If you see that there's people who have got potential and you have a network, hook them up. There's all of these kind of things that we do just to be pushing everything in the right direction. It's not one direction that we're pushing it from.
Oh, do you know, this is just so amazing. It's this personal responsibility challenge, question. Anyway, I've got another one here. How can white-centric teams make Bain new recruits welcome and get to hear their voices to help with the transformation?
Yeah, so it's tough, right? It's tough. And I talk about my daughter who did an internship in a finance company, do it as data. And I was like, who's there? Who's your auntie? Have you found an auntie? Please tell me. And she was just like, yeah, no, mom, no. And she was like, but the team of very young white male professionals were awesome because they were honest about what needed to be done. Does that make sense? They were honest. That's number one. Number two, even some of her, there was some other people that did look like her around the company. Yeah, they hooked them up. But it's not to say every Black person is great or brown person is great. We're still human beings. You did not necessarily have to like them. So that's number two. Number three, again, I've used network twice and I really don't like the word network, but look outside your company or your community. So I'll give you another great example. I live in an area, when I moved here, there was not a lot of Black people. It was a mixture. And I was just like, and I was brought up in a very multicultural area. And I said, I want my children to do that. I was like, where and how am I going to get my kids to get some input? And I was just like, and I'm allowed to do it, but I was like, right, you guys all go over to the athletics track, you're doing athletics. And I was just like, because I know that's where my people are at and what have you. And they actually made some stunning networks as well. So to answer the question a little bit more seriously, lean on other organizations, lean on other networks, see who is doing it well, and then hook up who you've recruited to them. Don't just stay like this. There's a whole world out there, and we've really just got to pull on everything. It's the only way that we're going to accelerate it. It's that thing about you're not going to be able to do it on your own, or your company's not going to be able to do it on your own. If you're white-centric, no judging, not judging here, but go find your Black friends.
Bumi, you have been inspirational this evening, and the enthusiasm and the passion with which you speak is just, I mean, it's incredible. But I'm so sorry that, be mindful of time. I'm going to have to pass back to Sarah just to sort of close off the event this evening. But thank you so much for that inspirational talk.
Yes, indeed. Thank you both. It was fabulous to hear from such passionate, authoritative, informed speakers on such an important issue. I've learned a lot. There's just so much to think about and process from what you've said. You know, honestly, you've both been brilliant. But before we close, I'd just like to ask you both if there are any final closing remarks that you would like to make. Andrew, is there anything that you'd like to say before we close?
Yeah, my final thought is, for everyone on this call, keep thinking to yourself, keep asking yourself the question, are you building artificial intelligence or are you building artificial racism? And if you feel like you are building artificial racism, then think broadly and think deeply about how you can solve that, whether that's your talent pipeline, whether that's your data sets, whether that's your stakeholder groups. And maybe, as Bumi said, think beyond your organization or even your own industry, and keep connecting and keep networking with other resources that can help you address those issues, because it's not going to happen overnight. And you may be in that position right now, but there are options, but it's about being proactive and really taking action.
Wow, thank you, Andrew. And Bumi?
Yeah, you know, I could share that, you know, Andrew and I gave this team a bit of a hard time when it was just like, who do we speak to? Where do we go? Why do we speak? And what have you? And whether when we speak, it will be more than just talk. So what I would ask is that, please, if you can do Andrew and I a favor, and like I said, just go and just think about, there was a lot that we've covered and we could do this for another 2 hours. Just think about the one thing that you can do within your sphere of influence, and then go out and do it. If you can take that action, whoever you are, and even if it's reaching out to us, even if it's going on Andrew's course, even if it's doing that to just get some more understanding, it's important. This is not about just coming and having a listen and tick off. It's about, and my daughter actually said this, she said, Mum, well, if you leave and if you can tell everybody to do the one thing that they're able to do, then mission accomplished.
But there has been so much covered tonight. I'm going to go back and we'll upload the video onto our website under the libraries tab in the next few days. I'm going to go and rewatch this because there's just been so much to think about and find where do we go next. So I'd just like to finish with, you know, to thank both the speakers for giving up their time to share their experience and expertise with us. Thank you, Claire, for managing the Q&A, and thank you all for joining us this evening. This is a hub for the community. We really appreciate your feedback from events such as this. We'll send you a follow-up email this evening with a link to the feedback form. It'd be great if you could take 2 minutes to complete it. I really hope that you enjoyed the event this evening and being part of such an important and informative discussion around the diversity of input at all stages of